Good evening, everyone. It's Tuesday, July 10th, 2018, calling the Town of Hingham Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Before we begin, I just turn the meeting over to Tom to make a brief announcement.
Sure. I just wanted to make the board aware and the public aware that tonight is the first meeting of our new Assistant Town Administrator, Michelle Monsegur, who we welcome with open arms. She's been terrific, very eager and talented, and we look forward to a long, fruitful partnership.
Fantastic. Welcome.
Welcome aboard. Okay, approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes dated June 19, 2018.
So moved. Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Public comment? Hearing none, we'll get right to it. Public hearing on the application for Section 15 gas station wine and malt beverages licensed by G.M.J. Group,
So the applicant in the hall.
LLC, Elie's Auto Service, 9 Short Street.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
Greetings, Counselor.
Greetings.
What do you got?
I'm here this evening, and Elie Yazbeck is with me to my left, who is the general manager of G.M.J. Group LLC, and he's the owner and operator of Eli's Auto Service over at 9 Short Street. We're here with you folks tonight for a Section 15, not to be consumed on the premises, wine and malt license for him to be able to sell at retail wine and malt beverages in the 377 square foot portion of the existing building there at 9 Short Street. What's happened is he's got a 2-bay garage, and he's got a convenience to the south, a little convenience area where he sells everything from Pepsi to Doritos to lottery, etc. So what you usually see. Back in 2016, we got permission and site plan review from the town to erect the canopy that you see out there now. So for years, folks would go, he has his employee come out and actually pump the gas. So it's one of the stations where you go and you get service, was a little rare these days. But we got approval to put up that canopy with some low intensity lighting. That was all constructed, has been built. He's further invested in, he redid the entire septic system there. He's redone the entire pad, everything that's there that you see currently. Back in May, we got approval to add a 79 square foot little bump out on the south side of the building. And what that's going to be, that is basically a cooler that's going to be accessed from the inside through both a door and then also some doors where you can have a reach in. As part of that project, what we've done is we've eliminated the 2 smaller, non-accessible bathrooms, and what's going to happen is it's going to be constructed a fully handicapped accessible unisex bathroom back there at the end. So what's happened is it's going from about 200 square feet of the convenience store now to, in the end, somewhere around 350 square feet with some affiliated storage, which will be storage for stock when it's not shelved up for retail sales. What we're looking at in this instance are, basically, you've got the gas station, the convenience store. They have full service automotive repair, including getting the state inspections. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has deemed him to be a reputable character with respect to both the lottery and also the inspections. He is the station of, if something goes wrong with your car, you need windshield wipers, etc. You probably, if it's not you, probably some of your kids, if you're like me, stop by Eli's, he'll take care of you. And that's pretty much the role that he's played in a whole lot of people's lives. He's been there since 2005, February of 2005. Before that, he operated pizza business over in Avon, Massachusetts. And then well prior to that, back in 89, 91, he actually operated a restaurant in Alberta, Canada, and that had a full liquor license. So he has experience in responsibilities with respect to serving alcohol. On a more contemporary basis, he's tips trained. He just submitted that to Sharon just today, and we've got the original certificate if it makes sense for me to get that over to her. With respect to what you folks look at, it's public want, and then it's also the appropriateness of the license grant at the location. Basically, coming in through here, it's something which, it's only beer and malt, and it's very scalable. So unlike perhaps something else which is bigger, which has the size to be larger, we know what it is. It's very, very modest size, it's very modest business. And with respect to the demographics, we've got a mile south to go to the Main Street deli, which has the full liquor license. We've got a mile going down to the Fruit Center, which is to the northeast, and we've got a mile going down to Hennessy's. So the entirety of Hingham Center in that area does not have any sales of wine and malt beverages. The property, and I thought that this was very interesting, it's Business A, which is relatively rare in town. So we've got two primary Business A areas, which are the downtown going all the way up to the Fruit Center, and we've got Hennessy's, we've got Ralph's, and then of course we've got the Fruit Center. So we've got three in that Business A zone, and then that also goes down to North Street, but that's where Pablo's Candy and an office building, the former Tedeschi's are. No liquor or beer and wine over there. And then the other area that we looked at, a little different, but it's the Business B, which is Queen Anne's, and then also George's Euromart up off of Whiting Street. So if you look at the distribution of the uses throughout town, I think this is, a mile away. When you look at the cases, that's a case after case. A mile would be, an obvious distance from others. And then what's interesting is the two others, whether it's Cracker Barrel, whether it's the Main Street Market, those are Residence A. So again, we are the business A, and if you look at the mix of the businesses, which you all do, dry cleaner, the bakery, the bagel shop, the real estate, this actually is a nice mix with the full-service station, the convenience, and again, we've got a long-term reputable owner. He's been there, if I do the math, it's 13 years. He lives in Abington. He's been married for 27 years. He's got 3 children. And he's been in Abington for 2 years, and from 2000 up until the time that he moved, he lived in Randolph, and those are some of the addresses that are listed with the LLC. He's in good standing with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and with that, other questions will be hours of operation. They propose 9 to 9 on Monday through Saturday, and then 10 to 8:30 on Sunday.
Noon, I see. Noon.
Okay, so noon's fine. So noon to 8:30, thank you. And what else? Oh, other questions will be, will there only be one person working there? No, whenever it's available for the sales of the malt and wine, there will be 2 people. One person will be inside. They will man the counter. They will stay at the counter. And for times that whether it's the Sunday off hours, whenever the materials aren't available, he'll lock that and then cover those up as we see, for example, over at Fresh Market, they actually put down some barriers so that you can't get at those. There's a storage area which is behind where the retail area is. That's being built as part of the bump out, and that's going to be used for the storage of any inventory, and that will be under lock. He works there solid 60. I think we put down 40 to 60. I mean, maybe with another person here, he gets to go home and watch TV a little more. I don't know, but he's there all the time. So unlike other situations where that might be a question where we've got people with multiple locations, it's the only location. He's there. He's actually doing the inspections, doing the repairs, and he's there. If you pop in tomorrow, you're going to be there. He's going to be there. With that, I think I've covered everything that I wanted to, and he can certainly answer any questions, or I can, and I've done all the talking, so I'll give you an opportunity to ask any questions.
Questions from my colleagues?
I'm good. So Business A, right, I think Business A affords an opportunity for any sort of retail. My understanding is the gas and repair part of this predates the requirement for a special permit, so, right?
1952, and then what has happened since then is we've been in twice for site plan review.
Okay.
So, for example, I can tell you that there are 8 existing spaces. We only need 6 under the parking requirements, and that's not even counting in Business A, you get a 25%, like a kicker, if you will. So without even using it, the planning board's already made the determination that we've got a surplus of the 2 spaces, plus arguably we've got, either 2 or 4 or whatever at the pumps, which will, I think, be, those will probably be, used significantly, as we've got the full serve. So when the person comes out, instead of sitting there with your car off, the thinking is it's an opportunity to go in.
Okay. And what percentage of the retail space will be devoted to alcohol versus convenience items? Do you
That's
get
an
some
excellent
sense of that?
question.
And
Percentage?
the extension we're doing, the addition, that's gonna be,
So the extension's basically 79 square feet.
Okay.
So if, I would say that's approximately 25% of the space.
Okay, so existing retail is going to sort of stay the same. I would assume, though, you might have some wine on the shelf rather than in the cooler?
Yeah.
What's going to happen is after they do the bump out, there's going to be a little bit of reconfiguration of the interior walls. So it actually goes from 200 square feet up to, say, 350, 377. And then what happens is, but that only is the result of the addition of 79 square feet. So some of that results from the reconfiguration of the walls and the creation of that storage area.
Okay. And the chief signed off on this, so, it looks like he was okay with sort of increased traffic. I'm assuming you're doing this because you hope to attract some increased traffic there, right?
yes, and at the same time, it's, the traffic is there, and
Sort of
especially because it's
convenience for your-
a full service, so it's, it add convenience to the customers, but
Yeah.
I don't think we'll create more traffic.
Yep, okay. I'll be honest with you, my first reaction to this was, I know it's Business A, it feels a little neighborhoody to me. So I was struggling with the appropriateness kind of prong of the analysis here, particularly when, as you suggest, up and down 228, there are opportunities to purchase beer and wine. I think that,
Would you want me to address that, or?
sure,
Okay, so I question the same thing. 228, former State Route 128, it's got quite a history. We figured a lot of that out when we were doing the history of the grandfathering, 1952, when it was built. We took a look down and we looked at the surrounding, what the surrounding uses are. And all of the surrounding abutting uses are all either the business or the common across the street or the former Park and Tree building. So if you look at it between, Reuven Levy's building out back,
Yep.
Hannibal Cleaners, the pharmacy, the real estate, if you look at all of the uses, they're, until you get up to the corner up over at Main Street, and then, is that East Street that comes out next to the bank?
right, yep,
Next to the buttonwood tree, is
Yeah.
that the beginning of East?
Love it.
no.
Levitt, oh, that's right, Levitt. It's not until you get over there and then you can go all the way across the street before you get to, to any residential,
Right.
so.
Unless,
everything's-
I sort of look at maybe I'm taking this aerial view of the parcel,
Yeah.
because then I'm kind of looking at cutting through the other way. But you have that chiropractor business, but you do have some residences kind of on that side of the street. I guess the thing, and I'll like to hear what Paul has to say, the thing that was kind of keeping me in the game here is the scale of this. To be quite honest with you, if it were much bigger than this, I'm going in the other direction. So the scalability here, I think, is just important in that location. And I realize that it's zoned Business District A, but it's kind of a unique stretch of roadway within kind of a bumping up against neighborhoods on, on all sides, so.
And that's why I had mentioned the scalability. We talked this through at my office too, and one of the comments was, think about where else that beer and wine license could go. That would tip and be, have a much greater impact, so.
And do you know, it's striking me that we don't have another service station that has a liquor license. Is
I
that
know,
correct?
It is, it
Okay.
really is. And we've also looked, this was another question, what does the ABC say about service stations? I can tell you that when you go through and you do the form, it's actually a drop-down for a gas station. It's section 15 gas station, which we ticked off.
Yep.
Also, I think the leading case is up in Revere, and it was a situation where the board there said, well, automobiles and alcohol, that may not necessarily be a good idea. If I dig it out, I can read it to you, but to paraphrase, the ABCC said, the purchase of alcohol in a retail establishment, virtually always involves transportation by a vehicle, somebody walking it out, putting it in the vehicle, and then taking it somewhere else for consumption. So there are multiple cases that, Randolph on Mizeo Drive, there are different cases that we can point to. Over there, it had to do with, I think it was like a car rental versus a gas station versus a mobile versus a Sunoco. It gets down to that type of minutia.
Okay.
But each of those cases that we look at, the starting premise is service station plus retail sales, not a problem, approvable, provided that noise, sound, traffic,
Parking.
reputation of owner, et cetera.
Okay. And my one last question for now is just, you've had some experience with the retail sale of liquor in a restaurant context several years ago.
Yeah.
Does ABCC, or how do you get your arms around, like, okay, I'm gonna start selling beer in a retail establishment? Like, how do you prepare yourself to undertake that task?
First of all, I'm very responsible person, responsible businessman, and I've been in all kind of situation, and I always been responsible,
Okay.
and I think it's the convenience of it all. That's what made me, and not only that, I think I want to put two people in there, and the store by itself does not.
Won't afford that,
No.
yeah. Okay.
So adding the liquor, the beer and wine, it will afford me to have two people there all the time, and I think it'll make the place is too small and a lot of traffic, I know, and it's busy location, and I do great service, that's why people come in. But if I have two people there, I think it may make the traffic go faster.
Thank you.
Did you submit Al Kearney's schematic of the floor plan when you went for site plan review with the planning
Yes.
board? So did you have a discussion with respect to the anticipated use, selling beer and wine?
Yes, and I told them that we were going to come here so that if you folks didn't approve it, then either it doesn't get built, or we've got a huge Coca-Cola or Mountain Dew cooler.
No Pepsi?
Well, I don't know. He's not declared his loyalty yet.
I've always treated the center very carefully, because as Karen pointed out, there's a delicate balance there.
I'm well aware of your history with it as well.
Yep, and, I used to work on the backside of that when it was G.Lo's. That area for me has always been tight, but it seems to work. I was there Saturday, and there was a guy working on a car in the aisle between the gas station and the pharmacy, and to me, it seemed like the place was bulging in terms of its parking capacity,
Yep.
notwithstanding your representation. You've got, at least two more cars that are always going to be on site by virtue of the two people that you've spoken about. Have you socialized this with any of the local merchants or any of the local residents beyond the statutory public notice?
No, Mr. Levy's on back. I know he got notice to this when we did all of the work. He was supportive. He's granted licenses with respect to all of the work that was performed between the properties. Do you remember that the pavement used to just kind of blend down from the back? which was, not only a mess, but it was.
Giant berm.
Yeah, so what happened was, as part of the, putting up the canopy, Eli went in, he cut all of that, and then he installed a hard wall, which helped with all the drainage and safety, et cetera.
Straight slope? Or?
Yeah.
How
So,
high?
Less than 4 feet, all approved. So what happened on that was that I think was a nice interaction with the primary neighbor. But other than that, the only other time that we had discussions, there were some concerns about the canopy when it went up. And then what we did was we specified, we went out, we got lighting changes. So if you look at what's there for those lights, that's actually, I think, 2 orders of magnitude less than what you see at other places. So if you go to another canopy, you're going to see a certain illumination by those LED lights. I can tell you, I just looked up the file real quickly. I remember we had C4 lights, which were the actual lowest, and that was a condition that we offered up at the beginning, which was all adhered to, and that had to do with concerns expressed by the planning board and the ZBA with respect for the neighborhood. So if you look now and you drive by, and it's impossible to take a mental image of what's there, but no, it doesn't look as bright as other types of gas stations, and that was specifically something that we followed up on because of the the neighbors, and there have been no complaints or negative comments. If anything, what's interesting is people, when they go in there and it's snowing or after the snow, now he's out there shoveling, you don't have to go into the pad. So we wind up with a lot of positive comments about that. So that's been a
Let me ask you another question, if I may.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit more about the service operation of the station. What kind of work? How deep do you do your mechanical work?
We try to keep it simple and don't
Mufflers, brakes,
take, yeah, I don't take heavy stuff because it's
no valve jobs?
no. I don't take like engine or transmission, stuff like that, because we don't have the room. I mean, we have the business, but we don't have the room. So I try not to take heavy things.
Do cars stay overnight?
Like very rarely, but try to finish everything on time. I have three of us now.
Are you the mechanic?
I'm a mechanic. I have 2 people, or 2 other people too.
Are the 2 mechanics going to be the on-site people in the retail store?
No.
So you're going to have 5 people there?
1 inspection, 2 mechanic, and 1 attendant, 1 inside. Yeah, 5 people. And the second attendant, the second guy in the store, going to be only specifically with the hours with the beer and wine.
So you got 8 spaces and 5 cars parked in it with employees, is that right?
Yeah. But they're not all at the same time. I mean, the night shift guys come by itself. There's nobody. So it's going to be 2 people after 5 o'clock.
And I'm going to suggest.
It's a touchy intersection,
No, I know
Jeff.
what you mean.
Here's my problem here. You got Main and Short.
Yep.
And that's a tough intersection, no matter how you cut it. It's tough to get across there. It's already been reconfigured once when we did 228. State wanted to take out the cut-through between the center, the pharmacy, and the concrete block. Plan board blocked that. But yet, it continues to get a lot of traffic pressure. Levitt and Short was redesigned as well, and you guys are smack in the middle of it. So if we get it wrong, we're just going to make a bad situation worse. So I personally would like to think about this one.
I think I take all of that. I thought where you were going had to do with the parking that's there. For example, if someone's working on something, and I'm going to suggest that he go in, we come up with a plan, in order to keep X number, free, clear, minimum. The other thing is that if that starts to transition to the convenience store getting some more traffic, he's going to want to make everything available in there in order to have it work. I would suggest that from a traffic volume and movement standpoint, that it's going to be de minimis, just given, a 79 square foot beer cooler, whatever's there for wine. And I think it's going to be, it's going to be a huge overlap for the cars that already go in there, in the existing movements. The existing movements are the existing movements. The gas station is going to be there, the convenience is going to be there, the lottery is going to be there. I think that, the management of the parking spaces, that jumps out at me as something that has to happen. But I think with respect to,
I don't see a problem
Tomorrow.
going north itself,
Yep.
cutting across lane of travel. I need a better sense of the parking arrangements there. I think that needs to be better understood by me.
all right,
So, if you want, I can do the vote tonight, but it won't be the one you want. Or, I can noodle this a little more in my own head. And if the ladies are inclined to go with it, you can, but
I mean, when do,
I'm just,
well, you tell me, when do you,
well, if there's a passing vote, regardless, I would work up and submit to you a parking plan for the use of the site. Other than that,
we don't have a gas station in town that I'm aware of that sells beer and wine.
Correct.
Maybe they have them in Weymouth, I don't know, I don't think so, none that I can
No,
think
we
of. I don't think they have any in Cohasset or Hull. I want to do this very carefully. I know there was a package store up in the center, I have fond memories, but that was on the other side, and it wasn't the pressure of 228. People would pull off, they'd get their stuff, and then they'd go down Levitt Street and back on, and that worked. That worked. This is a little different, I think.
If just, I understand where you're coming from. I may not necessarily agree with it, but, I've sat with you on this board for over 3 years, and I think this is one of a handful of times when you've asked for a little time to make a vote. And, especially given your past experience before coming onto this board, it would be important to me that if you have concerns, that we've got a couple weeks. Sir, I appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness of this, but if we could take this up at our next meeting, and that'll give
We're
Mr.
not in a
Healy the
rush
chance,
because he's
that'll give
still-
Mr. Healy the chance for questions, and I think what I'm sort of hearing from you is that the concern has to do with sort of the site and the dynamics of the site. I don't hear any issues with your application, your running of what is a fine business. I think it's just that the geography is kind of tricky, and we just want to understand that.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
No
Yeah,
problem at
I'll
all.
take a walk up there and.
No problem.
Yeah.
great.
I did
Yeah,
Saturday.
right, I'm just coming out empty-handed.
no, you know what?
I did Saturday, for the record.
I'd just like to say, I think it was a very thorough presentation, and I really appreciate it. I think you anticipated that this wasn't going to be an easy decision for us, and I appreciate your patience with us.
Thank you. Anything first time in Hingham, I
Yeah.
I do get it. And I think just the scalability is something that jumped out at us right away and said, this is modest, this is something that can be very controlled. Look at the numbers of employees that we're talking about. It's not a supermart, it's not one of those, large format where, they've got everything going. And I think that's a positive. But I also have some ideas for your concerns.
Okay,
and,
good. We'll chat.
With that together.
All
Great.
right.
And so we
Thanks.
meet again on the 24th? Okay. July 24th?
Oh, wonderful. Yes, thank you. I will not be on vacation on July 24th.
Now, you mean?
Yeah, right.
No, everything I do now, I have to watch out, or I'm going to spoil everyone's summer vacations coming to Boston.
Thanks.
Thanks again.
See you next
Appreciate
year.
it.
Thank you
Nice to
very much.
guys.
See you then.
Thank you, ladies. Next on the agenda, Bertucci's Restaurant Corporation, request for a change of manager. Join us at the table. Identify yourself by name and address, please. Good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
I'm well, how are you?
My name is Erin Landaverde. I live at 165 Norton Ave in Easton, Mass. And I've been Bertucci's in Hingham for the last couple of months. I've been with Bertucci's for 16 years. And 9 of those years I've been a general manager and held some sort of a liquor license.
So you're looking to replace,
Joe Enos, I believe, is
Okay.
currently on the liquor license, and he's my area director currently.
Any issues at the restaurant that you are concerned about, the outdoor dining? You're able to control that patio pretty well?
Yes, yeah, no issues.
Tom, all this is in order? Okay.
Well, I'm a fan.
yeah, I'd have to say, eating up there myself on occasion.
Would you take a motion, or you want to?
I'd love to, thank you.
I move that we approve the change of manager of Bertucci's Restaurant Corp., DBA Bertucci's Brick Oven Ristorante, 50 Derby Street, from Joseph Enos to Aaron Landaverde, subject to the approval of the Massachusetts Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission.
Second.
Discussion, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Welcome to Hingham.
Thanks for coming in, appreciate it.
Best to
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is a discussion with respect to harbor resiliency recommendations. And if you recall, we met a couple of weeks ago. We had a fine presentation by Bill Reardon, who's present in the audience tonight.
It's going to Mary.
He's the chair of the Harbor Development Commission. And we were presented with different scenarios as well as the costs. I think we've all had a chance to ruminate and reflect upon that, and perhaps it would be. Are you saying something over there, Tom?
Yeah.
I'm just whispering to Karen. Thank you for calling it out.
Anytime, brother.
I wasn't paying any attention to it.
Okay. So just to refresh your recollection, there's the granite, there's the concrete, and there's the steel. And there's varying prices with that, so.
You know, I'll start if I may.
Sure.
You know, Bill, thank you to you and the committee. It's helpful for us that you sort of do a little work and then bring it in, and we talk about it, and do a little work and talk about it. And it's funny because, you know, we're boaters and we go different places, and I've been paying attention in the last few weeks to, you know, the wharfs and the materials and things, and, you know, admiring a concrete pier in Salem. And for me, what was very helpful about the presentation was the lifespan of the different materials, and looking and saying that while, you know, while the granite is more expensive, it actually has, it lasts longer. And, you know, from my perspective, I sort of look at it and say, is the Harbor Development Committee asking the right questions, digging into the detail in the right way? And, you know, I kind of think my role in a lot of ways is just sort of the process. And I like the process that you're going through, which, you know, means that, you know, similar to the height and similar to the other pieces, I'm comfortable with the recommendation. The one suggestion that I would make for us as a town is that we not pursue Seaport Bond Council funding until our existing project is completed. I think it's taking a little bit longer, and I would worry that a new application for a project would trigger questions about the status of the existing, and I wouldn't want that to get messy in any way. So, you know, my only request would be, you know, let's keep going with the work. Let's be ready to get in the queue for that and other possible funding. But let's make sure that that other project is completed before we put another application forward to Seaport Bond.
And I think Roger Fernandez is well aware of that, the diplomacy of how we deal with Seaport Bond Council and maintain our credibility. So I'm certainly open to that. We, you know, when we presented to town meeting, we spoke in terms of an August application because that was the next available time to kind of get in the queue. That may not be the right time, in which case we'll go to the next. I think it's twice a year.
I think it is, and I'm just mentioning it now because if I remember correctly from previous applications, that comes back to the board, and I just, you know, you know,
The application comes back.
Right, and,
sure.
you know, Paul and Karen may have different views, but I think it's important for me to kind of, you know, set some of my expectations and communicate my thinking on it. Just, just to help you in terms of staging your work and other things.
No. I appreciated your presentation last time around. I spent some time with those materials, and I'm good to go.
I'm not a boater, Bill, but when I go down to court in New Bedford, I look at the sea and see how they build their walls and things of that nature. I share Mary's view that the granite, even though it's more expensive, is ultimately the better course of action to take. It's
For the two that are recommended, we're not recommending granite for the
Right.
Veterans Memorial
Right.
Park.
right, but to me, it's consistent and it's appropriate, so I'd be inclined, I'd be in favor of that, so.
Do we need to vote? I see we have a vote here. Do we need to take a formal vote, or does the confirmation you're getting give you sufficient direction?
Well, let's just frame it. We have an existing contract with Beals and Thomas, which you folks previously approved, and that was based on funding in 2015 and 16. This is more, it's almost like design build, in the sense that we're to the next step, and we wouldn't make that step without a sense that we have the town behind us. And as I mentioned last time, we've been before the Historic Districts Commission, the Historical Commission, the Conservation Commission, and the Building Department folks. Haven't had a chance yet to meet with advisory, but again, it's not a money issue now. That's simply doing with them what I have tried to do with you, which
Sure.
is to keep everybody in sync. And
Which is very
they
helpful.
decided they wanted, especially given the significant change in the advisory committee, that they would do it once their new members are on board. So, strictly speaking, no, I don't think there's a vote necessary because there's not a new contract being signed, but it
okay.
is, sense of the meeting that the recommendation put before you by the Harbor Development Committee is something that you concur with, and that we should continue our work with Beals and Thomas and keep them going. That's what I need from you.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, the vote just clarified that exact statement, that what you're endorsing is what was presented to you as a recommendation by the Harbor Development Committee.
Okay. If it,
That's fine.
if that makes it part of the record, that,
Sure.
okay. Would you take a motion?
Sure, I would.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd make a motion to adopt the recommendation put forth by the Harbor Development Committee to advance the design of the inner harbor walls utilizing town meeting approved funding to include Town Pier Veterans Park, the former Mobil Station, and Barnes Wharf, utilizing granite wall and armor stone type construction as recommended during the presentation on June 19th, 2018, to the Board of Selectmen by the Chair of the Harbor Development Committee, and as shown on the plans provided by Beals and Thomas Engineering dated March 3rd, 2018, all subject to obtaining the required state and local approvals and permits.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Convey our thanks to the committee. It's been a lot of hard work.
Long time, long way to go.
It's all right. We're with you.
You'll get there. Okay. Now, we'll turn to the next item of business, and that is the water company acquisition update. And at this point in time, I turn to my colleague Mary Power to make the appropriate introductions.
Thank you.
We will entertain questioning following the presentations, but I'd ask anyone so inclined to inquire to wait until the presentations have concluded, and to the extent that there are questions, please address them to the chair. So with that,
Thank you. So we've had, a lot of, there's been a good amount of activity on the water company, the potential acquisition of the water company, and thought it would be a good idea to share some information with the town. What I'm going to walk through very briefly, some background information, mostly to make my colleagues in the town aware that this is information we're going to be putting up on the website tomorrow morning. We're going to be putting up a PowerPoint presentation, and there is also kind of a Word document version of this same information, kind of in a question and answer format. The idea is to just make information accessible. This background information is really just kind of a 20,000-foot look to set the stage. Some of it is information that some of us are aware of, but I know in my dealings and going on around town, I sometimes get questions from people about different aspects of this. After concluding this, I'm going to invite Ed Siegfried and John Asher to come up and provide a financial update. The recent rate case hearings have concluded, and the rate case hearing actually had some bearing on the financial analysis that previous boards have seen in the past, and again, thought it was timely to give an update of information as of what we know right now. Obviously, more information still to come. Just in terms of background, and again, this is going to be on the website, so I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but the Hingham Water Company was incorporated in 1879. It has always been privately owned, and in terms of the size, there are just over 13,000 what are called connections, or what I call customers. Those customers are located in Hingham, Hull, and 334 customers in North Cohasset. We've traced the history of the water company ownership, and while in the early 1900s, some of the information is a little less readily available. We know that for about 66 years, American Water, then became Mass American Water, actually owned the water company. Since 2002, our water company has had 3 different owners. In 2002, a British company named Kelda acquired our water company, and we were folded into what they had, which was an Aquarian Water Company subsidiary. 5 years later, Kelda sold Aquarian to Macquarie, which was an Australian bank, for $860 million. And just last year, in 2017, Eversource Energy acquired Aquarian from Macquarie for $1.68 billion. And I would just point out that if you look between 2007 and 2017, the customer base of Aquarian, it only changed by about 11,000 customers. But look at the value of the company. Macquarie bought it for $860 million and 10 years later sold it at about double the price. Pretty significant. We are part of Eversource. They have 4 million customers, 230,000 of them are water customers. The arrow points to a small orange area that represents Hingham, Hull, and Cohasset, which we refer to as Service Area A. Service Area A is 72% of Aquarian's Massachusetts business, but it's worth noting that we are only 6% of Eversource's entire water business. They have a lot of water business in Connecticut. In early May, they tried to buy Connecticut Water to add another almost 500,000 customers. That was not successful, but what this says to me is with Mass American for many, many years, we were kind of a small local water company. That changed in 2002 with Kelda, and now 4 million customers, and we're 13,000 of them. Within Massachusetts, we are one of the few communities that is actually serviced by a privately owned water company. The blue dots that you see on the screen represent communities that are serviced by Aquarian, and that's just about 20,000 customers. There are some other privately owned companies that mostly service small portions of communities, and that's only about 13,000 customers. So of all of the water customers in the entire state of Massachusetts, only about 32,000 of them are serviced by a privately owned company. The idea of a publicly owned water company is not unusual in Massachusetts. In fact, we're a little bit of the anomaly. In terms of our water system, water delivery system, the water sources are the Fulling Mill and the Accord Pond, 12 wells and pumping stations. There are 2 storage tanks. There's 190 miles of pipe in Service Area A, which is about 1 million feet. There's a water treatment plant. And the Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP, they limit the amount of water that can be withdrawn from the aquifer in a year. For service area A, that's just under 1.3 billion gallons. It translates to about 3.5 million gallons a day. But as we know, during the summer months, the usage is higher than 3.5 million. During the winter months, it's a little bit lower. During the recent rate case, Aquarian actually provided some information about water main replacement history that I think is pretty interesting, and it tells a little bit of the story about the infrastructure. If you look at the graph on the left, and I apologize, it's a little tough to read, that shows the number of feet of water mains that have been replaced in service area A, which is Hingham, Hull, and North Cohasset, for the last 12 years. So between 2005 and 2010, it looks like the average is about 400 to 500 feet every year. We have 1 million feet of water mains in Hingham. From 2011 to 2015, it looks to be an average of about 1,500 feet. Now, 2016, it jumps up to about 8,200 feet. But I would also point out that 2016 is what's known as the test year for the rate case. And John and Ed are going to talk about the rate case, but essentially, when a utility asks for an increase, it establishes a test year that is the basis for increases. It is advantageous for a utility in a test year to have increased or accelerated spending. The 10-year average is about 2,000 feet of water main replaced every year. And again, that's heavily influenced by that 1 year, 2016. On the right-hand side, you'll see what that translates to in dollars, but I would point out that the graph on the right is for Aquarian of Massachusetts, so we are about 72% of that total. In 2016, Aquarian commissioned a CANU study that, among other things, looked at how much capital investment would be needed in water mains around the system. And they looked at 3 alternatives. They looked at what would happen if $1.1 million was spent. They looked at spending $1.8 million a year, and looked at what $2.6 million would look like a year, every year. And if you look at the graph, this study actually, the red bars indicate a spending level of $2.6 million a year, and the blue bars represent actual spending, significantly lower. The CANU study actually was recommending that $1.8 million each year be spent on capital, and if my memory serves me correctly, they are recommending that through the year 2070. So what this study is essentially suggesting, and we know that we have an aging infrastructure, is that in order to repair and maintain, similar to what we've done with all our roads, we need an investment for service area A of about 1.3 million a year, because that 1.8 recommended amount includes Oxford and Millbury, so we're about 72% of that. So about $1.3 million a year is what's needed in capital. One of the consequences of lack of investment in the infrastructure are emergency water repairs. The town engineer keeps track of the number of street opening permits for emergency water repairs, and you can see the data for the last 11 years. Through year-to-date 2018, and I think this was the end of May, that represents 208 emergency street openings for water main repairs. And, we established in 2011, we established a road moratorium and said that we don't want roads opened up for 5 years after they were repaved so that we don't denigrate their quality. If a water main breaks on a road that was just recently paved, we got to open it up. This is one of the reasons why we try very hard to coordinate our efforts with the utilities. But if you notice, particularly in 2015, 16, and 17, there were a lot of street openings. And there were a couple streets that we had to open more than once that had been recently paved. So, that's affecting our investment in the roads. In terms of regulation, the Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP, regulates every Massachusetts water company regardless of whether they're publicly or privately owned. The DEP monitors and regulates water quality and water supply. they certify and license treatment and distribution system operators. They do that for everybody. For the privately owned water companies, those blue and yellow dots that we saw on the graph, the Department of Public Utilities is the rate-setting agency, and they also require the filing of annual financial returns. One of the things the DEP pays attention to, they have some performance measures. And one that we've talked about a lot, the Water Supply Committee's talked about a lot, is unaccounted for water. Unaccounted for water, as the DEP defines it, is the percent of water that goes into the distribution system that is not accounted for from service meter readings or from unmetered municipal uses such as firefighting and street cleaning. The DEP has a standard of 10% unaccounted for water, which is the red bar on the graph. The blue bars that you see is the unaccounted for water as reported by Aquarian from 2010 to 2016. And you can see that we're well above it. In 2013 and 14, it was up to 23%. I believe if you look at 2005 to 2010, it was also in the, above 20%. So a lot of people say, well, okay, sort of, what does that mean? What does 18% unaccounted for water in 2016 mean? Well, if we achieved a 10% DEP standard, that translates to 93 million gallons of water every year that is either available for consumption or that could be conserved, that wouldn't even have to be pumped out of the aquifer in the first place. That equates to the annual consumption of over 1,000 households. It translates to 21 days of average consumption for our service area. Or another way to look at it is, in 2017, we withdrew 187 million gallons of water from Accord Pond. If our unaccounted for water was 10%, we could withdraw 49% fewer gallons from Accord Pond. This shows how a rate case works. I'm not going to go through the detail, but I would just mention that the DPU allows private utilities to submit certain things in rate cases. For example, companies are allowed to submit a rate case that enables them to earn a return on equity of between 10.5% and 14.5%. Wouldn't you love your savings accounts to earn that much money? Every year, guaranteed. If companies have depreciation, that can be charged back to ratepayers. Legal expenses for rate cases can be charged back to ratepayers. And, there's an entire process. This is just a look at, this is a 20-year look at our residential water bill. And, this is using an assumption of 90,000 gallons per household. But, whether you use more gallons or less gallons, your rate experience is the same. Under Mass American, between 1996 and 2001, rates remained the same. When Kelda bought Aquarian in 2002, there was a rate increase in the first year, and then rates held steady. When Macquarie purchased Aquarian in 2007, as you can see, there was a pretty large rate increase. By the way, that's about, the DPU awarded about 2/3 of what was requested. Another rate case occurred in 2012, and you'll see in 2012, when we began the feasibility study, since that time, we've seen 2 reductions in rates. The water treatment debt was refinanced, and there was a 1-year kind of a tax refund that resulted in $400,000 of savings that was given back to ratepayers. Now, we're aware that there's a rate case that's pending right now, and we think it's appropriate to talk about it a little bit because the hearings have concluded. The current rate case, which is DPU 1790, for those of you that want to go to the file room and read all about it, is requesting a 13.89% rate increase that includes a 10.5% return on equity. It is also requesting a capital surcharge in the amount of $1,725,800. And this is for all of Massachusetts, which is a total potential rate increase of just under $3.5 million. Again, we represent probably about, 72% of that. Our expert, we have someone who helps us with rate cases, providing expert witness testimony, and it is his estimation that if this rate case is awarded by the DPU, that over the next 5 years, it will result in an average increase of $300 to a water bill. And I just pivot for an aside and say that, the last time I had an opportunity to give a presentation to this board, we were talking about all the capital projects we had, and we were talking about, 47% of our population being over 65, and people having cost pressure, and how much latitude do we have for affording capital projects. I would suggest that any sort of utility costs that people pay are part of the cost of living here in Hingham. And if our water bills go up by $300 in the next 5 years, that's $300 that we don't have for some of the very important capital projects that are being advanced in this community, one of which we just heard of tonight. The current surcharge, it's called RIM, W-R-I-M. It stands for Water Reliability Improvement Mechanism. And it's a way to both accelerate capital investment, and it's a way for the utility to recover their costs sooner. And the rationale, and I think this is really important, in their testimony, an Aquarian representative said, the company is not in a position to increase the capital budget without introduction of the RIM mechanism. So there it is. For the last several years, we have said, the town has maintained that regardless of who owns the water company, all of us as ratepayers are going to pay for the improvements. And, here it is in black and white. And, Ed and John will share some financials with you to dimensionalize this. The second quote just references the fact that this RIM instrument is being used by other companies in other states. So, to the extent that that will be persuasive to the DPU, we will know later this fall. The way this surcharge works is that it's levied annually as a percentage of the revenue base, and it has a cap on it. And during the rate case, when the town asked what projects it would apply to, it is proposed, as the slide says, that it would apply to incremental distribution projects completed after the end of the test year. The test year is 2016. And that the proposal is not isolated to specific projects. In some other filings, it has been suggested that the recent painting of the water main of the water tank at Accord Pond and that the water main replacements at Butler and Sherwood Road would be paid for with this surcharge. Now, the impact of this is that this incremental investment gets folded into the rate base, which becomes the basis for the next rate increase and the next potential surcharge. So, while RIM is an accelerated capital investment, I would also say it is an accelerated rate increase for the customers. It's just going to make this all go faster because it has a compounding effect. I'll just close by reminding us of the reasons that Hingham initiated the feasibility study in 2012. At that time, our water rates were the 5th highest in the state. There were persistent emergency water main breaks without a plan to fix in the coming year. There were customer complaints about service disruptions and fire safety. To allow the town greater control over management of the water supply and water delivery infrastructure, and the acknowledgement that a private company owner's first responsibility is to its shareholders and not its customers. It was interesting to me, but when I actually pulled that information out of the warrant in 2012, and I was struck at how many of those conditions still exist today. So with that, I'd like to invite Ed Siegfried and John Asher up to the table, and I would just mention, we all know John and Ed as both former chairs of the advisory committee who have shepherded the town through challenging financial circumstances and have been, great stewards of the town in many different ways. I think we're also fortunate, and they are a good example of town volunteers who lend their professional expertise. And, John and Ed are pretty understated about it, but their professional experience in business and financial matters, I think is something that we are benefiting from as a town. And I think we're very fortunate to have them be so generous with their time. And I think the quality of the analysis that they've done for the town on many other projects, including this one, I think the work speaks for itself. And, in particular, as we get through some of these numbers, it can get complicated pretty quickly. And I think we're very lucky to have them helping us figure some of this out and share the data with us.
Okay. Ed's going to do the hard part here, but I'm just kidding. I want to just say that when the Water Company Acquisition Study Committee was formed by the Board of Selectmen in May of 2012, the board's first meeting, May 30th of 2012, it voted a set of principles of operations that incorporated the fact that none of the five of us were coming at this task with any predisposition as to outcome. So we were just going to follow the data and report it back. And I would say that's what Ed and I are here to do again tonight. We are not here to advocate any position, more just report the data and let people draw their own conclusions based on what they see. When the committee had gotten together, and we've relatively quickly established 4 criteria for any recommendation that the committee would make back to the Board of Selectmen about whether or not to recommend a potential purchase by the town of the water company. The first, and I'm now focusing on those 4 bullets in red. The first was what we called rate transparent acquisition, which basically meant that if the town meeting were to vote to acquire the water company, that the acquisition itself would not necessitate a rate increase by the ratepayers. Secondly, to address the point that Mary has highlighted in her background, that there should be more money put into accelerated capital improvement, and that would be done 2 ways. One, upon the purchase of the water company, if the town voted to do that, that a significant capital reserve would be immediately established, and that it would be replenished annually to ensure that we could continue to improve the system faster than had historically been the case. And finally, that all of the feasibility study costs, including the costs of litigation, would be repaid back to the town's unrestricted fund balance. We received quite a deal of financial statement information from Aquarian. We looked at their rate case filings with the DPU, and Ed sat during the second half of 2012 with Aquarian's directors of rates and regulations to really walk through in great detail exactly what Aquarian's costs were in order to provide the system as we had been experiencing it and continue to experience it. What Ed and I did was to relatively quickly build an Excel model, a spreadsheet that's turned into a workbook with several spreadsheets, that compared the costs of continued
ownership of the water company by Aquarian, with what the costs would be were the town to vote to acquire the water company, the water system, and run it without private ownership. In other words, publicly owned it. In order to complete our financial analysis, however, we had to resolve two issues. One was, what was the purchase price of the water company? Because that would have a great deal to do with the affordability of acquisition by the town. Secondly, was the water treatment plant, in fact, going to be part of any acquisition by the town? Was it covered by the 1879 statute which incorporated the water company in the first place? Those 2 points were the subject of several discussions between town officials and Aquarian executives over the course of the second half of 2012 and the first several months of 2013. As Mary has said, the water company was incorporated in 1879 by statute, which, among other things, gave the town the right to acquire the water company whenever 2/3 vote of town meeting affirmed that sort of motion, whether or not the seller was willing. The statutory language also includes language relative to how the purchase price would be determined, a fairly run-on sentence which was really the source of the dispute between the town and Aquarian regarding its interpretation, but in a key point being that up to 10% interest per year would accrue to the value of the capital infrastructure in the calculation of the purchase price. As I said, the town officials sat with Aquarian executives in 5 meetings over the course of the second half of 2012, for several months of 2013, with an eye towards attempting to negotiate a mutually agreeable purchase price between the town and Aquarian. Aquarian was consistent in its position that it had no interest in selling the water company to the town, and so we failed to negotiate a mutually agreeable price. As I said, we needed to know that price in order for Ed and I to complete the financial analysis, and we also needed to know, as you can see from the final bullet on that chart, whether or not the water treatment plant was in fact part of the system as governed by the 1879 statute. Because negotiations were not productive, the Board of Selectmen voted to file suit in July of 2013 to resolve the 2 primary issues in dispute: the purchase price under the statute and whether the water company, the water treatment plant, was in fact governed by the 1879 statute. The trial occurred in the Suffolk County Superior Court Business Litigation Session in February of 2015, and the court issued its final judgment in April of 2016, addressing both issues in dispute. First, the court ruled that the price as of year-end 2013, the year that the town filed suit, was roughly $88.6 million. Oops. So that is the rightmost column for showing the year-end 2013. During the trial, and actually from the time that the committee really began its work in May of 2012, over that intervening 12-month period, the town used the services of 3 different, actually into 2014, 3 different water company experts, all of whom independently, without any consultation with one another or reference to work product, all valued the water company purchase price at between $50 and $60 million. Aquarian in 2012, as part of the turnover of financial information to the town, had stated in, actually here in Sanborn Auditorium, that the price to acquire by their interpretation of the statute was $184.5 million. So the court's ruling in April of 2016 basically said not $50 to $60 million, and our town expert witness had maintained that the town should pay $52 million. During the trial, Aquarian was stating that they felt that the purchase price should be $192 million. The court ruled 88.6, again, year-end 2013, which necessitated the fact that that price would have to be rolled forward to get a better understanding of what a current purchase price would be. And so Aquarian and the town this past April agreed to do that, and agreed as to what the roll forward price would be as of year-end 2017, which is $103 million. So about $14.4 million more than the court ruling for year-end 2013. Averaging that over that 4-year time frame, that's about a $3.6 million increase per year. So with those two rulings, and the court also ruled, I should say, that the water treatment plant was in fact an integral part of the water system governed by the 1879 statute. Were town meeting to vote to acquire the water system, the water treatment plant would be part of that acquisition. So the two issues that were in dispute resolved by the court, affirmed by the appellate court, and that gave Ed and I the ability to then finish the financial analysis, and that's what Ed will now begin to walk you through.
You want to go to the next slide? Okay, thank you. Let me begin by saying when we first started this project 74 months ago, John and I were both in high school. I've said that before, but it's been a long effort. In May of 2012, 74 months ago, when we first started this project to determine if it was financially feasible for the town to consider purchasing the water company, there was a significant amount of financial information, a mountain of it, that we could dig into. In 2011, Aquarian filed for an 18% rate increase, and the DPU approved a 10% increase to go into effect in 2012. We reviewed all of the DPU 2012 DPU rate case data and other information in great detail. As John mentioned, we had 3 meetings with Aquarian in late 2012, during which we compared financial data and reconciled our numbers. And the end result of this work over a 6-month period in 2012 was that we identified approximately $6.7 million in Aquarian costs, $6.7 million, that could be eliminated annually if the water company was town-owned. We originally presented this analysis at the 2014 town meeting. The analysis indicated that approximately 55% of the costs that Aquarian was charging us for water could be eliminated under municipal ownership. That's 55 cents out of every dollar that we're being charged. Next slide. Okay, slide 7. The $6.7 million in eliminated cost consists of water treatment plant lease costs of $2.7 million, return on rate base, which is essentially profit, of $1.6 million, federal and state taxes of $600,000, depreciation of $850,000, and other expenses including rate case expenses, corporate overhead, shared office space, legal fees, customer satisfaction surveys, rent for facilities in other towns, all of which add to another $1 million. No labor reductions were included in the costs that were eliminated. No water treatment costs or quality control costs were eliminated. As the slide says, these are costs that an investor-owned utility is allowed to charge ratepayers. These cost elimination numbers were based on Aquarion's 2012 approved charges of approximately $12 million. They are now requesting a rate increase, which John will talk about in a few minutes. We believe that the $6.7 million in costs would still be included in their new rates, perhaps a little higher, perhaps a little lower, but not substantially different. The committee also concluded that the costs that would be eliminated were more than sufficient to cover the cost of outsourcing operations and maintenance of the water system, pay real estate taxes to the town, similar to the arrangement with Hingham Light. It would also cover some additional municipal ownership costs and cover the debt service required to purchase the water company, and also repay the town for all of the expenses incurred in funding the litigation, plus pay for $5 million in system improvements in year one and $2 million every year thereafter. After funding all of this, there would still remain a very substantial cost savings difference over many years between town and Aquarion ownership. As this slide shows, one of the financial requirements was a rate transparent acquisition, meaning that the acquisition alone would not necessitate a rate increase. One of the objectives was to establish a significant capital reserve upon acquisition. Another was to replenish the capital reserve annually by $2 million and to repay all of the feasibility study costs, including all the litigation expenses. As you can see from this chart, total costs start out in year one at about $8.4 million municipal cost, due primarily to 1 year of short-term financing of the acquisition debt, and starting in year three increases by an average of 1.2% annually. That means municipal costs would grow about 1.2% a year. Total municipal costs then decline by over $4 million in year 32 when the acquisition debt is paid off. The next graph shows that municipal operations and maintenance costs will grow about 3% a year. Again, overall increase, including debt service, grows by about 1.2%. The municipal operations and maintenance costs include property taxes, the payment to the town, which they currently receive, all the outsourcing services of an outsourcing firm, and some additional municipal costs, not very significant, but some additional costs, and some transaction costs to get the deal done in year one only. The acquisition debt financing, the purchase price would be financed by the issuance of a 1-year short-term note, followed the next year by the issuance of a 30-year general obligation bond. Both the 1-year short-term borrowing rate of 2.25% and the 30-year long-term rate of 3.75% have been validated by Hingham's financial advisory firm. And you can see with level principal and declining interest, the debt peaks in the first couple of years and then declines and is ultimately completely paid off by the 32nd year. The annual capital reserve financing shown on this graph is the debt service to replenish and to expend $2 million a year for system improvements starting in actually $5 million in year one, $3 million plus $2, and then every year thereafter, $2 million a year at a long-term borrowing rate of 3.25% over a 20-year period. That debt service levels off sort of at a constant level in around the 20th year. So in 5 years, this would mean $13 million would be spent on system improvements, averaging $2.6 million a year. Over a 10-year period, $23 million, averaging $2.3 million a year. And over 30 years, a total of $63 million in system improvements, or $2.1 million a year. The next series of graphs is really just a recap of the four that you've seen previously. The upper left graph being total municipal ownership costs growing at 1.2% a year, operations and maintenance costs growing 3% a year, the acquisition debt service and repayment of the feasibility costs declining over time and then being fully taken care of by the 32nd year, and also the last graph on the right-hand side, lower right-hand side, is the annual capital reserve financing debt service of $2 million a year.
Okay. Ed and I have maintained the model that we originally built in June of 2012 and periodically updated it as these variables on this chart have changed over the last 6+ years. We have the interest rates that you saw quoted by Ed are the result of ongoing discussions with the town's financial advisory firm, and reflect their best projections in terms of interest rates that would hold true through annual town meeting 2019. We also used letter estimates, which we have kept up to date from a reputable national water system outsourcing firm that happens to be the firm that outsources the Cohasset Water Company, and have used those costs as one of the elements in the building up of what it would cost were the town to acquire the water company. The feeling being that the town would best be served on a number of fronts, not the least of which being implementation of best practices by people that run multiple water systems to outsource to a vendor the operations and maintenance of the water company. So we've received initial and then 2 update estimates from them, but just to make sure that we're getting the best view of what outsourcing costs would be, the town will be issuing an RFP by week's end, this week's end, for to multiple firms.
Underscore that point. We have issued at the Goods and Services Bulletin online at the state an intent to publish that RFP by Monday, I believe. You have to do it with the Goods and Services Bulletin a week in advance.
Okay. So we will get more than one input in terms of outsourcing costs and obviously update the model accordingly. From an Aquarian perspective, as you've heard both Mary and Ed relate, the current rate case has provided more recent data than we had from the discussions the second half of 2012, 2013. And I'll go into that in some more detail, but importantly, that rate case was originally filed in April of 2017 to take effect in 2018. In February of this year, following Eversource's acquisition of Aquarian in December of last year, Aquarian filed a significant amendment to the rate case proposing the water reliability improvement mechanism that you heard Mary describe, which is a proposed surcharge, very similar to the surcharge we already have on our water bills for the water treatment plant, that could be up to $1 million a year, and that would take effect, if approved by the DPU, starting September of next year, September of 2019. With the introduction of, well, and I guess the last point I would make is similar to the discussions that Ed had with Aquarian's Director of Rates and Regulations back in the second half of 2012, the frequency and magnitude of future rate increases is a key element also of the projection of Aquarian costs going forward. So we had one version of the model, and with the amendment of the rate case in February proposing the RIM capital surcharge, we created a second version Both versions of the model will be available for public view starting tomorrow morning. They'll be there in both Excel form as well as PDF form. So what we did was to, in scenario number 1, as you will hear Ed describe in some more detail, not include the rim surcharge and just project forward what Aquarian cost would be were the DPU to approve the proposed rate increase of 13.89%. And again, as I mentioned just a minute ago, in our model, we assumed that Aquarian would file for a 10% rate increase every 3 years. That would be the lowest rate increase that I'm aware of since we've been tracking it. The second scenario that Ed will walk through includes the RIM capital surcharge using only the data provided by Aquarian in response to interrogatories associated with the rate case. We asked for projections of data beyond 2021, and Aquarian said that they were not able to provide that. So we said, okay, we'll just use the data that you can provide, and Ed will now walk through the results of running the two scenarios.
The first scenario, well, first of all, the model that John has mentioned, we built this very detailed financial model by year for 38 years, starting in 2012, running it out to 2049. It consists of 40 columns, 24 lines of data, and about 960 pieces of financial information. This allowed us to update the data as more and more information became available, which it did. What this chart shows in scenario 1 of the model, it assumes that the DPU approves Aquarian's 13.89% rate increase filing, but excludes any water reliability improvement mechanism annual capital surcharge. Using Aquarian's starting revenue requirement, which is in their rate case filing, of $13,777,941. This is based on their March 19th, 2018 DPU filing. Our financial model projects over $136 million in cumulative cost savings under municipal ownership from 2019 to 2049, a 31-year period. 136 million, that's with the 13.89% requested rate increase, 10% rate increase every 3 years, and no RIM surcharge. Just a word about the assumption on the 10% rate increase every 3 years. On page 117 of their DPU filing 1143, several years ago, it's announced here, their announced policy was to file rate increases every 3 years. That was in their company brief at page 53. Also, in 2009, 3 years after Macquarie acquired Aquarian, they asked for a 36.6% rate increase, and they received 21.4%. Again, 3 years after Macquarie bought them. 3 years later, in 2012, they asked for 18.72%, and they received 10%. So there's 3 data points that we felt supported this version of the model and the assumption of a 10% rate increase every 3 years. Moreover, a factor in the RIM calculation is that the aggregate RIM that they can charge, a cumulative aggregate RIM, cannot exceed 10%. Is that correct? So they have to go in for a filing whenever their rates, their RIM charge, rose to 10%. But again, this number of 136 million is without the RIM. The next slide, which is the second version of the model, again has the 13.89% requested rate increase, the 10% rate increase every 3 years. However, it reflects the RIM as we understand it, the RIM surcharge for 2017 to 2021 only. We used the starting revenue number of $13,777,941 and the associated rim surcharges based on Aquarion's provided information to the DPU while adhering to their proposed rim rate caps. That's the 10% I mentioned. Now, the cumulative savings under town ownership in this version of the model summed to $304 million from 2019 to 2049, again a period of 31 years. So those are the two versions of the model. Again, as John said, they will be up on the website tomorrow for detailed review. Because people have been asking, show us the detail. As of tomorrow, the detail is going to be there.
Okay. As you can see from Ed's description of the, particularly scenario 2, the proposed rim has a pretty significant impact on the rates that ratepayers would pay if approved by the DPU and if Aquarion continues to own the water company. This is a pretty busy chart. This presentation will also be up on the website, I think tomorrow. But I'll summarize those 3 quotes in italics with 2 statements. And Mary alluded to that in her background when she described the rim, which is, the first is, the rim has a compounding effect because the capital expenditures during any one rate case become part of the rate base when Aquarion would next go for a rate increase filing with the DPU. The rim surcharge factor resets to 0, but the rate base has been increased by the amount of the rim surcharges during the prior rate case. Secondly, as the bottom quote, under what circumstances would rim end? And on the 8th of June, Aquarion responded that the company cannot predict under what circumstances the rim would end. So we'll know by late summer, early fall, whether the DPU will approve both the rate case 13.89% and whether or not the rim will be part of the rates that ratepayers will pay starting September 2019.
You know, and again, it's worth emphasizing that in that second version of the model, we've only taken the rim out to 2021 and not extended it beyond 2021. Next conclusions. Okay. What's the same under town ownership? Well, the town will continue to receive property tax revenue the same way it does today. And as Mary has said, the ratepayers, we the ratepayers, are going to pay for capital improvements, whether Aquarion owns the system or the town owns the system. That's the same. What's different under town ownership? The costs of doing business, running the water company, increases at a slower rate, the 1.2%. The implication is there are going to be smaller increases resulting in substantial savings to ratepayers. Secondly, no surcharge is needed to accelerate capital investment, and the acquisition debt retires after 31 years, and the town is then fully paid for the system, and costs decline significantly after the debt for the purchase of the system is fully repaid.
So to conclude, we just say that as of the end of May, the town authorization from town meetings and reserve fund transfers to date sums $1,490,000. There's still some money remaining of that authorization. That's contrasted with the blue bar on the right, which is the result of ratepayer savings from 2 actions by Aquarion. If you'll recall, town meeting approved this feasibility study in April of 2012, and in November of 2012, about 6 months, 7 months later, Aquarion refinanced the water treatment plant debt, resulting in a $926,000 reduction in ratepayer costs. And that $926,000 reduction we've enjoyed since 2012. The other reduction is a $410,000 one-time IRS sort of tax refund in 2014. Cumulatively then, since 2012, ratepayers have paid just under $5.6 million less than they would otherwise have paid. I have to say, though, that in the interest of full disclosure, the CEO of Aquarian has steadfastly maintained that the refinancing of the water treatment plant debt was not triggered by the town's initiation of the feasibility study 6 months prior in 2012. That kind of winds up our financial update, and I guess now the chair will entertain questions.
Gentlemen, lady, thank you all so much. Your explanation to us and to the town, I think, is exceedingly helpful. I have one question with respect to the rim charges. Did you give any thought to what those costs would be after year 31 if they stayed in place? And if so?
Yes, the answer is yes.
And what?
And the answer would be that the $304 million savings over a 31-year period, if the rim were to continue, would be more than double the $304 million.
And it's a necessity because presently they're not putting in the work needed to keep the system up to snuff as it is.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that
That's a shorthand expression.
the projection that Ed just referenced adheres to the caps that Aquarian proposed to the DPU, that in no single year would the rim exceed 5%, and in no single rate case would the rim surcharge exceed 10%. Even adhering to those caps, the result, were rim to continue every year through 2049 would more than double scenario 2's savings.
Karen?
Yeah, I had a question on, what standard does DPU use to determine whether Aquarian or Eversource can include a RIM program as part of their rate case? So they had a rate case before DPU, right? And then this RIM program was an add-on. And I guess I'm wondering, how does DPU review that? Do you know?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer, just because did not attend the rate case hearing. I know that the town's council in the rate case has asked multiple times for more data and better understanding of what the intent was with respect to the RIM surcharge. How the DPU is evaluating that, I think we'll all find out when they issue their ruling, but I have not seen in the reading I've done of all the interrogatory responses anything from the DPU describing their reaction to the February amendment that included the RIM.
Karen, I would just add that, because the rate case was filed in April of 17, so 10 months in, the magnitude of RIM was pretty significant, and Hingham and Hull, and we are both interveners on this case, and we share the expenses. Both Hingham and Hull kind of said to the DPU that they opposed the refiling and said, hey, this is really late in the game.
Yep.
This is super late in the game, and it's a significant amount of money, and suggested that it be, if this was to be proposed to file a new rate case, the hearing officer allowed it to go forward. And the hearing officer only made a minor modification in the hearing schedule. Whether or not that is any sort of a signal as to the DPU's decision, we don't know. but they allowed it.
Yeah, so, I mean, part of what I'm trying to guess at is, hey, how likely is it that it would be included as part of our rate package? And I guess, you know, my reaction to it, right, is that if you look at the canoe study and you think that the system should have been supported with infrastructure improvements of, you know, X million dollars per year over the course of several years, and that wasn't done, you know, now, I guess my reaction to the information is Eversource comes in or Aquarian comes in and says, well, if I'm going to try to keep up with the information I have about the system I run, then I'm going to need to find some money to do that. And, you know, I either cut into the 55 cents that leaves service area A, or I ask for more money from the ratepayers of service area A, right? And that's what the RIM does. But I guess maybe I'll try to track down some of that information in terms of what does the DPU look for when a company comes forward to ask for more capital improvement money.
One of the things I would encourage you to look at, if you go into that file, the rate case file, is the objection raised by Maura Healy, the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
It's a very well-written objection. I don't know whether the DPU will pay attention to it or not, but she goes into great detail about what was said in the testimony relating to the acquisition of Aquarian by Eversource.
Okay.
The testimony that they gave at that about future rate increases and the need for additional capital. She said this was not specifically what you told us at that point.
Yeah.
Was just the opposite of what you're saying now.
Right. And I guess the other thing that, the other thing I just find concerning about the RIM project is the compounding effect on the rate base. So you might look at it as one-time monies in some respects, that you're going to improve your capital infrastructure by X amount per year, but then it gets folded into the expectation of the company for, you know, continued service provision. So if I understand it right, and jump in if I'm wrong here, let's say they did RIM for, I don't know, 2 or 3 cycles here. That RIM money then falls into the base. They could not undertake another capital project, but the base rate has now increased to sort of anticipate capital improvements that may or may not happen when the RIM project goes away.
And you get, you know, just 2 points on that. Anything that folds into the rate base is eligible for that 10.5% to 14% return on equity. So, you know, the $1 million in capital costs the ratepayers of Hingham, you know, 10.5% to 14% higher.
On top of that.
On top of that, and, you know, the canoe study suggested $1.8 million through 2070. So I think we've all understood that this is an aging infrastructure that needs a lot of investment. So if...
Which is why you've built that into the financial model.
Well, and if Aquarian has said, we can't improve the system without this RIM program, and they have a study that says $1.8 million for 50 years, that would suggest to me that this RIM program would be necessary beyond 2021, because it's only throwing $5 million at the infrastructure.
Yep.
And, you know, I would have to wonder with a rate case, once a mechanism like that gets approved, you know, it sort of feels like it would be part of, it would become the new normal.
Yep. Well, and I think there's a statement in the slides that suggests that the corporation doesn't see a natural end date for it at this point.
We can't predict it.
We can't predict that, yeah. I guess I have just 2 more points. One is, you know, back to your earlier point, Mary, about cost. You know, I view this analysis, like you do, as part of a fixed cost that residents and ratepayers bear. So it goes hand in hand with the hard work that we do, that the departments do, the school committee does to try to maintain affordability on the one hand. You know, to me, this is part of that same conversation, and these sorts of numbers are troubling in that regard. The other point I guess I'd make is bringing us back to the road paving slide. You know, again, we ask you for money so that we can improve your roads, and we take it really seriously. We inconvenience you when we do the road building work. We've come up with this 5-year moratorium. We publish the schedule. We try to work with the utilities to make sure that when you need to get into the road, you can get into the road. And the graph demonstrates that Aquarium wasn't doing that, didn't do it. And I think the thing, again, that strikes me about it is you paid for us to pave the roads. We all paid, taxpayers paid for that, right? And so now a water main breaks. We got to dig up a road that we just paid for. Guess who pays for it to be repaved again? We do. So this isn't a cost that's borne by a company. These are costs that are all borne by the ratepayers. So when you look at the red on Mary's slide that jumps out at you, you've paid double for that. And I just, you know, I find it troubling, so.
And I think emergency repairs, just in general, I think about my household, an emergency repair is always more expensive than the regular. So if you think about the investment made in water mains, if many of them are emergency, those dollars are not working as hard in our community as they could be.
Right, and it doesn't even take into account the disruption to, you know, families in Hingham for loss of service and whatever. But I think it's important to keep in mind that these are all ratepayer costs. They're not coming out of any other pocket but ours.
At the risk of stating the obvious, when you compromise the integrity of the roadway, you have to repair it quicker, and that just costs us more money down the road. That's why we have the 5-year moratorium in the first place, because once you start digging up the road, it lends itself to an increased deterioration, so. Gentlemen, great job.
Really, really well done.
Fantastic.
Mary.
You too.
Thank you.
Comments from the public? All right. Well, thank you. I'd urge you to watch this presentation a couple of times. I think
I know I'm gonna.
you know, the explanation is rolling out and being provided to you, and it certainly won't be the last conversation on the matter. But
And tomorrow morning, the 2 models, the 2 presentations, and Word document versions that are a little more descriptive will all be posted on the town website. And as new information unfolds, you know, these analyses will be updated.
certainly, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
175 is coming. Okay, next on the agenda, compressor station task force update. Good evening, Mr. Ross.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for joining us
Thank you for having
tonight.
me.
Thank you for giving us an update. I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Great, thank
This is
you.
your presentation.
Do I need to state address and stuff, or are we good? Joshua Ross, 125 Wampatuck Road. I do not have any charts or graphs or finance to go over.
Thank goodness, because that was all I had right there.
And I'm a finance guy, and I would do that in a second over some of the legal stuff in here. So I'm going to go through, hopefully relatively quickly, where we are in the 6 months that since we've convened. I apologize if I turn my back to you.
Okay.
So here's a quick outline. First, we have a couple of members in the audience with me. I am the chair. Kristen Casey is not here. Mary Farrington couldn't be with us either tonight. We have Dr. Turner Bledsoe is here with us, and Mr. Richard Norman is here with us as well for moral support. So when we started back in January, the board has given us a list of charges, so I just want to go over them since this is the first time that we're here, and so that it's on public record and so everyone knows. First thing, outlining the anticipated public process complete with any review and approvals, denials issued to date, as well as remaining applications and the issuing authority. This work should include a clear timeline for what has occurred and what is pending with due dates. Second, reviewing pertinent information to identify how the town of Hingham is affected by this project, summarize this information, and provide to the Board of Selectmen for its review. And third, alerting the Board of Selectmen to opportunities for engaging in the public process and providing support as requested by the board. So hopefully we will go through all these tonight and answer any questions that you may have. So the first thing when we started, some of us were new to this industry. Thankfully, some of us were not. So I think it would be helpful just to get an understanding of what actually is a compressor station and walk through some high-level stuff so we're all on the same page. A natural gas compressor station is the necessary component in the transfer of natural gas from the source well to the end users. The compressor station regulates the pressure and flow of natural gas through the gas lines, and that's, in a high level, that's what it does. The components of the compressor station, there are scrubbers and filters to clean the gas, one or more compressors to pressurize the gas, an aerial coolant system to cool the gas for blowdowns, natural gas fueling stations to power the plant, backup generators, gas metering equipment, gas filtration systems, system monitoring and safety equipment, and some have odorization equipment to add I'm going to pronounce this wrong, mercaptan to gas to detect leaks. So basically natural gas is odorless, and they add this chemical to indicate any leaks by odor. So the Weymouth compressor station is part of a larger project, the Atlantic Bridge project. And so what this is that this project will add 133,000 cubic tons of natural gas transmission to the Algonquin and Maritime pipelines. Construction of approximately 6.3 miles of take-up and relay pipeline in New York and Connecticut. A construction of a new 77 horsepower compressor station in Weymouth, Mass. Addition of 2 new compressor units for a total of 14,000 additional horsepower at 2 existing compressor stations in Connecticut. Replace 2 existing compressor units in existing compressor stations in Connecticut. Update the capacity in 1 compressor unit in an existing compressor station in New York. Why is the Atlantic Bridge project being constructed? Basically, Algonquin and Maritime have signed separate long-term contracts for natural gas transportation services with 8 shippers, 4 local distribution companies, 2 manufacturing and industrial companies, 1 marketer, and a municipal utility located in Connecticut, Mass, Maine, New Brunswick, Canada, and Nova Scotia, Canada. The Atlantic Bridge project is not designed to transport liquefied natural gas, LNG. The project addresses the need for additional natural gas supplies in New England and the Canadian Maritime provinces. The status of the project is the work on the compressor stations along the Atlantic Bridge project have been completed except for the construction of the new compressor station in Weymouth. So the compressor station in Weymouth is the last piece of the puzzle. So where we are with that compressor station is that there's 2 avenues that we have to take a look at. One is on the local level, and one is on the federal level. The federal approval has been granted, although right now it's held up in Federal Court of Appeals. Locally, 33 permits have been approved with only 2 outstanding: air quality and coastal zone management. So I also have a timeline that I'll hand out to you. It's literally 2 pages long, and it would take us 2 hours to go through it. So you guys can read it at your convenience. So on the federal level, the town of Weymouth and a group of other folks sued FERC which is the Federal Energy Regulation Committee. Basically, for 7 reasons, and I'll go through these because I think we think they're pretty important to understand what the suit is about. They're not actually suing the company, they're suing because of the approval process. So the first issue is whether the commission's rehearing order is final for review because the commission lacked both a quorum and the authority to delegate issuance of the tolling order to staff. Second, whether the commission improperly issued its certificate order before the Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management had certified the project's compliance with the Coastal Zone Management Act. 3, whether the commission violated the Natural Gas Act by approving an admittedly unsafe combustible project that does not comply with the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration's regulations. 4th is whether the commission failed to satisfy its National Environmental Policy Act obligations by not preparing an environmental impact statement and by relying upon incomplete, inadequate, or misleading information. 5th, whether the commission violated the National Environmental Policy Act and the Council on Environmental Quality's final guidance on climate change and greenhouse gas emissions by failing to consider the impacts of the project on air quality. 6, whether the commission acted arbitrarily and capriciously in concluding that the project will not adversely affect environmental justice communities disproportionately. And 7th, whether the commission's grant of certificate under Section 7 of the Natural Gas Act was arbitrary, capricious, unsupported by substantial evidence, and contrary to the present and future public convenience and necessity. I bet you at this time you wish I had graphs.
Keep going.
I'm going. So that's the federal. So right now it's in the Court of Appeals, and that could come up at any time. And so the 3 possibilities is that the court finds in favor of FERC and they issue, and it's over. The court finds in favor of Weymouth and it's over. Or there's one of the 7 things that come back and the court says, yes, we agree with Weymouth, you didn't do one of these 3 things, and they open up the re-permitting issue, which is an important thing to note down the line. So that's the whole federal side. The local side, it says 4 permits up there. 2 of them are just sort of going to happen once the coastal zone management happens, so it's sort of arbitrary. But the 2 big ones are the air quality permit and the coastal zone management approval. So the air quality permit, Governor Baker ordered a stay of air quality permit by the Mass DEP in November 2017 until a health impact assessment was conducted. So on a side note, the state of Massachusetts has asked Hingham to be part of this health impact assessment, which the meeting, I believe, was on June 21st. We have 1 member of our group part of that, as well as a member of the community. I'm not sure if our Department of...
She did.
She went as well. So there's 3 members of the Hingham community part of this overall assessment that Massachusetts thinks we should be a part of, which is an important step.
Is one of your task force members representing Hingham at that?
Turner
Okay.
is one of our
I knew
members.
Mary had originally
No, Mary
indicated
is,
that she was
Mary was
unable.
going to split it with Jen,
Okay.
and they said no, so
Okay.
Jen is,
Great,
Mathina is going to do it, along with Turner.
thank you. Great.
And so, even though it's not part of our overall
Yep.
assessment, we still have a representation there. And
Thank you.
We'll, as things go along. So per federal court order, the Mass DEP must issue, deny, or condition the air permit by January 11th, 2019, and the agency appeals must be concluded by June 28th, 2019. So again, this is all on the state side. And then the other part of it from the coastal zone management aspect is that we were hearing some rumblings, but didn't have any official notifications on some of their stays. We had reached out to Representative Machino, and we actually got the official letter, so I'm going to turn that into you guys too for your record, so you have it. And so they extended a stay of the application until February 2019. So those are the two sides. What happens if one gets approved and one doesn't? So on the federal side, even if the Court of Appeal approves or favors in this against Weymouth and they say that you can go forward, they still can't do anything until Massachusetts issues their permit. However, if Massachusetts issues their permits and the federal court is still in either the Court of Appeals or goes higher, they can start construction once they have all Massachusetts permits, even though if it's still in court. So you got to kind of think of it in the two columns. I haven't been updating my... So what have we been doing over the last 6 months? We've worked through the charge you gave us, those 3 points, to focus on really how does this impact Hingham. We understand we are part of a bigger South Shore community, and some of these towns have greater impact than Hingham does, and we're not blind to that, but we really try to stay focused on the things that could impact Hingham. We have further narrowed our analysis to focus on what actions the town of Hingham maybe it'll take at this point in the project, like you asked. So with regard to the federal appeal, there's really nothing we can do. It is all the way up into the courts. All the appropriate members have been put on the lawsuit, and all we can do is wait and see what happens. If they come back and say you have to go through another part of the permitting process and the process is opened up again, I think that's when we can kind of look at whether or not it's appropriate for Hingham to get involved then once they reopen, if that even happens. And again, we won't know. That could happen at any time. It could happen a month from now, a week from now. We just don't know. So we also, we're aware that Hingham citizens have expressed concern related to the location's proximity to Route 3A and the Fall River Bridge. We also believe that this is an issue covered within the appellate issue as to whether the commission violated the Natural Gas Act by approving an admittedly unsafe combustible project that does not comply with the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration's guidelines. Some of our committee members have also expressed concern about the potential impact of global warming and climate change may be having on the town in the way in which any of the existing natural gas infrastructures may continue to contribute to global warming. We believe that this issue is covered within the appellate issue as whether the commission violated the National Environmental Policy Act and the Council on Environmental Quality's final guidance on climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. It is important to note that I'm sure with all committees, there is not 100% agreement in all of these views. So we understand that there are concerns in the town, and we feel that the appeals process that is going through the federal court right now addresses a lot of these issues, so it will be either determined through them. So getting back to the local side of the permitting, as previously mentioned, permits required for Mass Coastal Zone Management and Mass DEP for air quality are still under review and not yet been issued. The air quality permit. Algonquin Gas own air dispersed modeling report acknowledged that areas within 10 kilometers of the compressor station will be affected. Recognizing the serious concerns regarding the air quality and public health in the Fall River area, Governor Baker directed the Department of Public Health and the Department of Environmental Protection to jointly prepare a focused health impact assessment, as I mentioned before. The assessment is meant to document the current background air levels at the site and the incident or prevalence of relevant health conditions within the community, and will also consider the future air quality impacts of the project on public health. As I mentioned, Hingham has been asked to join that, and we've sent 3 people. Numerous issues have been raised with regard to the air quality assessments conducted by FERC and contained in their environmental assessment. Two of those issues are methodology. Air samples were collected on Harrison Avenue in Boston, not really close to the Fall River Bridge. And reporting. Pollution levels were reported as averages, which fails to identify spikes that occur on particular days. Therefore, the compressor committee would like to propose that the town file for intervenor status with the Mass DEP regarding the issue of an air quality permit for the compressor project. This would preserve the town's right to be involved in the Mass DEP's air quality permitting process in the future should the town determine the need to do so. If the town does not file for intervenor status, it will forfeit its right to participate in this process anyway in the future. The filing process merely requires the town to submit a letter with the Mass DEP. I think it's just a small filing fee, and again, council can direct you on that. And as far as the coastal zone management permit, as I mentioned before, there's not a whole lot coming out of there. We believe that this is the final permit that will need to be issued. And as I mentioned before, they have recently issued a stay to February 2019. And so that's where we are. There's a lot of information, and this is also a very fluid situation. Things come up all the time. I just want to say, for record, the committee has been doing an outstanding job gathering and explaining a lot of the information. There's a lot of legal stuff. There's a lot of technical stuff. We're lucky to have someone who's very familiar with compressor stations on the committee, as well as a lawyer. So thank you for that. So other than filing for intervenor status, it's really a wait and see with what happens with the Federal Court of Appeals. And then if something comes down and there's an opportunity, I think we would have to revisit it and see what the pros and cons of that.
Right, yep. And the intervenor status is only with respect to the air quality permit, not the coastal zone management?
I don't think we can.
We can't, okay.
Right.
Do we know, Josh, I remember attending a meeting in Weymouth, and I heard Dr. Norgard, and I with some of the air quality, and if the town were to engage as an intervenor, does that strengthen our ability to have air quality monitoring in Hingham? Because one of the things that's been talked about is being able to monitor the air quality, so that if it's built, there would be monitors around to do it. And you know, given our proximity, I would just wonder, is there any relationship to being an intervenor on the air quality and our ability to get a monitoring station in Hingham?
I don't know what and maybe Turner can talk about what happened at the actual meeting with the HIA about whether, I think we were going to be part of it. I think they were going to put a station in Hingham regardless whether we were part of it or not. We want to be filed for intervenor status because it gives us a seat at the table down the road. Because since we don't have any say in the federal proceedings right now, this is sort of our last chance to say, hey, this is something that's on our radar. More so if down the line, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So as they go on in this, and who knows what the future holds, it's just that we understand that the state has said, we believe that you should be part of this, and this is basically saying, we agree, we want to have our names on it, so to speak.
Does filing for intervenor status obligate the town?
I don't believe so, but again, that would be more of a legal question for.
And I know you had a few questions. One of the things, moving towards the end of the fiscal year, our town administrator really tried to limit a lot of our legal
Shutting off the
activity at the
town.
close of the fiscal year across the whole town. Where there were things that could wait a couple of weeks, we wanted to do that, and, you know, appreciate the committee's understanding on that.
That's fine. We were just weren't sure the overall process, and we didn't want to offer up anything that was kind of out of the ballpark type thing.
Let me ask you a hypothetical question, and I'll say that I understand you might not be able to answer it, because this is a complex subject, and I appreciate the work that you've done and taking a very complex subject and explaining it all, you know, for kind of the first time. I feel like I understand this this multi-tentacled project. Let's say that FERC comes back and for some reason says, you know, we side with Weymouth on one or more of these 7 points. Did you discuss at all whether, if that were to happen, whether you might come back and recommend that the town engage on that? Or I can understand if you didn't, because it would be kind of hypothetical.
We didn't specifically come up with recommendations, but we understand that if that was the case, we would then, it would involve a lot of legal activity, which is, again, we wouldn't recommend anything before knowing what that legal cost would be. I can tell you, the folks involved have already spent millions of dollars on this.
City of Weymouth has spent millions of dollars in legal fees on this.
So it's not only Weymouth, I believe, there's a list, I have a list of all the people, and there's a couple of private citizens who I think live right next to the bridge, who are lawyers, who have, excuse me, dedicated hours and hours of time to this. I believe it's the city of Braintree, the city of Weymouth. They filed multiple lawsuits. It's already up to the Court of Appeals. I don't want to guess, but there is another level above that if they don't get that. And so if they open it up, I think it would be prudent of us as a committee to sit down and look at it and say, okay, they said for one of the 7 things, it didn't meet the, like the global warming standards. You didn't do the right thing. And so then do we say, as a town of Hingham, yes, we think that this is something that we need to sort of get in on. But we haven't really, because we don't, there's a lot of areas there, one of 7. And one of the things that we've realized is that some of the things that, say, Weymouth is fighting doesn't concern Hingham as much as we're.
Thank you. Yep.
So one of the things that we've decided as a group is that they're big on, well, what about the noise pollution with the running of a compressor station? Well, we feel for Weymouth, but it doesn't, the sound doesn't affect Hingham. So we're only focusing on stuff that really
Thank you. Yeah.
affects Hingham. Now, traffic, access to the bridge, one of 2 ways in and out of Hingham, that affects a lot in Hingham. If something were to happen, you know, to the compressor station. So that's the stuff we looked at. Obviously, the air pollution is something, depending on how the blowouts are and where the wind travels. We talked about water pollution significantly, actually. And yes, there's the potential of it, but given the fact the way the water is, it would have to go out and kind of come in and around to where Hingham is. So again, we were trying to focus solely on what you charged us with.
Thank you.
Is if this would affect Hingham, water not so much as air or disruption of traffic or overall global warming. You know, clearly if you were down in Crow Point this year, we had 2 50-year floods in a month. So those are the type of things that, you know, we were looking at.
Josh, in terms of the time window in which, for filing for intravenous status on the air quality, what, do you have does the task force have a sense of when that window closes? Is that?
We don't, because it's all dependent on if they come back and say, we're gonna issue the permit. So our recommendation is to do it sooner than later.
Okay.
And like I said, it's just a letter and it's just, hey, we wanna be.
Yeah.
I don't think it ties us financially to anything, which would be my first question. You know, if we sign up to be intervener, do we, it's just on the air quality permit.
Yeah, I do think that, you know, taking that step is also signaling to other communities that we tend to engage, and that's, you know, we would need to sort of be prepared you know, I feel like once we go kind of out there as an intervener, just my feeling is that we would need to be prepared to carry that through to some sort of an action.
I'd like to get a sense as to what council projects would be the arc, if we did something like that.
And the flip side of that is if we do nothing, we're kind of done.
Well, and this work is really helpful because I think, you know, when we first started talking about this, we were sort of trying to understand what are the different points where we can engage and what are the pros and cons. And it's just helpful to have that narrowed, not just in terms of where things are in the process, but what things have the greatest impact on Hingham, because if we're using taxpayer dollars for some of this, we need to be mindful of that. So it's, the narrowing is very helpful to me.
Yeah, and so maybe we take as to do what Paul's suggesting, which is to chase down with legal counsel cost and timing and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. That's,
On the intervener status. And I guess we would, you know, we may be done to a certain extent, but we're not done. We then may need to re-engage once the First Circuit rules.
Yeah.
Right, because we don't know.
Right, but once, like I said before, so once the local permits are issued, they're gonna start
Good to
building.
go. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
they've already filed, they're kind of getting a little impatient at this point. Because I think it was already supposed to be constructed or done by now. So the fact that it's being pushed out,
We're still working on Baker Hill, and that's 40 years.
Well, and the fact that the other parts of this pipeline are, this is the thing that's holding it
holding
all
up the
up,
whole thing,
so.
they already have contracts in place, they already have, everything else is, yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming in. Is there
Thank you
anybody
both,
else
too.
who'd like to add anything before we go on to the next topic? Well, thank you, sir.
Thanks for your time.
And
Thanks very much.
As we're going to be I think we're going to be starting to talk about our goals in the next couple of meetings, so I feel like this is really timely and very helpful as we're thinking about,
I agree with that, yeah.
you know, thinking about all these different pieces. Josh, may I ask the task force, you know, one additional piece is, it's sort of two things. One is, to the extent that you do hear, that there are any developments that you're aware of,
Yeah.
if you can please, you know, just continue to communicate those to us. And then secondly, I know we've got, you know, people attend, you know, part of this HIA group, but to the extent that there are other kind of public meetings or things that in your mind, given where you're recommending we focus, would be advisable, it's great to know that members of the task force are attending and staying on top of this, but to the extent that there's a time when you say, you know, I think one of you should benefit, or making us aware, that really helps, because, you know, you folks are kind of our connection to a lot of that activity.
Right. And I think one of the things that we wanted to try to differentiate is that there are a lot of groups around town that are advocating for one way or the other, and we're trying to, they've been very helpful, honestly. The timeline is their timeline, because
Yep.
they've done all the work and they've offered to share it with us. But we're trying to focus on the facts more than the advocacy part of it. So as relevant state hearings and events come up, absolutely. A lot of it have been other things.
Sure.
So,
Well, and I appreciate your staying focused on that and staying true to the charge of the group. And, you know, hopefully that provided a little bit of a path as well, because
it's a lot of stuff.
it is a lot of stuff.
You may, if you go to the podium, and identify yourself by name and address, so that the folks at home can enjoy the benefit of your comment.
I'm Turner Bledsoe.
How are you, Doctor?
Taken residence at 201 Linden Ponds Way. I just wanted to emphasize that the global warming implications of this are probably what plays out to be the most significant thing for Hingham. There was a meeting a week ago in Belmont High School where Ed Markey sponsored a forum on the climate crisis, which highlighted the fact that we are in a state of crisis, that the progress of the warming of the globe has come to a point where we are at significant risk if it continues. And so every moment that there is a delay in abandoning fossil fuels, including natural gas, we are going to see the future of all the coastal cities in the country at risk. Sooner, the longer we delay, the sooner it will occur. So I think that's an important message.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Yes, Mr. Norman.
Richard Norman, 3 Shoot Avenue. I respect Turner's view. I don't consider myself a climate denier, but I would point out that the issue was addressed in the environmental assessment and the various proceedings before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And to try and briefly summarize, they basically indicated that it was beyond the scope of their review. There also is the whole question of the advantages and disadvantages of having a compressor station addition, in the sense that the natural gas that would be supplied, in many cases would displace oil, would result in an improvement in climate. Additionally, and this is a very complex subject, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but Attorney General Elie issued a report with regard to the need for infrastructure additions in the area of New England. Presently, the inadequate infrastructure has had a lot of significant economic impact, both for us as ratepayers, and the consequence of the lack of the infrastructure, such as the Atlantic Bridge project, results in the importation of LNG. When we talk about climate change, it's not Hingham, it's not New England, it's not the United States, it's the world. The consequence of bringing LNG in is the fact that you have a very inefficient and expensive process, which actually would result in more emissions if, in fact, the consequence of not having the compressor station addition, which would permit the delivery of locally produced natural gas. So I would merely say that the end result here may be that the citizens of Hingham say climate change is the issue upon which we should look at the compressor station, and we should not permit the expansion of a natural gas infrastructure. And that may be the decision that the citizens and you selectmen may want to make, or alternatively, you may want to take a look at the alternatives. And in this particular case, as Josh has indicated, there is a defined legal process, and to the extent that that process is exhausted, and to the extent the existing law is met by Algonquin, then under the law, the compressor station is going to be built. So those are the dilemmas, and we really have tried to work, I think, in a collegial way. We've tried to address the facts and nothing but the facts. So when you heard that there wasn't a majority opinion, you now know where Turner stands. So, thank you.
I discerned that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate everybody bringing the different viewpoints, because if we all think about things the same way, I don't think we have such a vigorous discussion, and the recommendations suffer as a consequence.
They've both been a wealth of knowledge, too, so it's really been extremely helpful.
I'm on hour 17, Doctor, and we have another item, so I want
All
to
right.
keep moving. Okay.
Communicate to you independently,
Absolutely. Sure.
and I will communicate to the group.
Thank you.
That's an open invitation to anyone in town. Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming in. At this point, we have the pleasure of receiving an update from the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust. Joining us tonight is its chair, longtime member Tim White. Greetings, Tim.
Good evening.
How are you tonight?
I'm terrific.
Great. What do we got?
Tim White, 35 Kimball Beach Road, Chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust, recognizing one of our members, Kathy Amonte, in the audience. My understanding is you folks were all provided a copy of the Treasurer's updated report.
Yes.
And that, I think, to the credit of Anita Comerford and Sue Nickerson, really lays out the history of funding that the trust has had since its origination back in 2007. It has actually changed since you received it. We now no longer have any opportunity funds left in the bank, as we closed on 499 Cushing Street today.
Great. I saw the sold sign. Great,
Yeah.
good for you.
Yeah, so the good news is that we do expect to get some more funds from the last town meeting of $464,500 to replace that. We don't know when that's coming in. It's nice to get it sooner rather than later. Concerns that it might not be till the end of the year, but we're working on that.
There's one other pot of money, right, we're half expecting as well.
Yeah.
Just about $40,000 from another development in town as a mitigation.
And I don't know if we have a timeline on that at all.
3 weeks ago. We're working on it.
Terrific. All right. All right, so a quick summary, folks, for you. What we've done over the past year beyond the finance aspect of it. We recently received approval to see whether or not Cedar Street is an opportunity for development. We are now in line with an engineer to get the hole dug and see whether or not it's going to perk. We are finalizing a housing plan with Emily Wentworth to put that out for a request for proposals. As I said, Whiting Street closed, and on Friday morning at 8 o'clock, I will be meeting Emily Wentworth and Roger at the site to take a look at it and see whether there's a potential for a second unit up there. Excuse me, that's Cushing Street. Whiting Street, I have nothing to add beyond, I understand you folks recently received a letter from DHCD indicating that they'd received the LIP application from Habitat, and I would expect that we'll have a site visit from them in the not-too-distant future.
Great.
And that is a quick summary of the trust.
And you'll let us know about that Whiting Street visitation, site visit?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was asked one more thing to just to let you folks know. We do meet monthly. So it's typically the third Wednesday, but sometimes with school vacations and the like, it will become the second Wednesday or the fourth Wednesday. We do meet monthly, and we invite all to our meetings. And having now our new Selectmen representative attending our last meeting was a great addition.
Remember,
I'm a member, yeah.
not just
Got
a
the it, yeah.
representative.
I tried to soft pedal it for the first meeting. Sure.
I have an observation with respect to the Canterbury Street payments.
Yep.
I'm not sure I was really happy with the way that went, because I remember permitting that, and the developer was difficult, and I thought he took kind of a shortcut out of, he built all that, market units up there in exchange for this, and he got an awful lot more than what he gave and what he was required to give, so.
That option is no longer available, as I understand.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. That's my comment.
I just would say, I appreciate that the Affordable Housing Trust continues to look for opportunities. I like the fact that you're looking in different parts of the town, that you're very focused on a project that kind of fits within the neighborhood. It's, that's kind of the mission and the vision of the Affordable Housing Trust. And I have an appreciation for how much work goes into one house, one unit. And I know it takes a lot of patience and persistence, and I appreciate both from the group.
We have a terrific committee, and we appreciate the
good.
support that this board gives us as
That's
well.
huge, actually. Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Anybody else? All right. Crowd is
Thinning out.
winnowing.
Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you very much, Tim. Appreciate that update. Appreciate the work you're doing. Okay, what else do we have?
Some appointments, we have the
Okay.
sidewalk vote.
Let's see, it's been busy sneaking in.
Yeah, keep it going. Sidewalk sales, want to do that one?
Okay, sure, why don't we do that?
Would you accept a motion? Or you want?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
You want to talk about it some more? Or?
I'll just get to it.
I'd like to move, at the request of the Hingham Downtown Association, to use the sidewalks for the annual Summer Sidewalk Sale, July 26th through 28th, 2018.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So now we start the annual exercise of appointments and reappointments to the different town committees and boards whose contribution to the community is vital to its success. And as some of you know, those that have been appointed to these boards typically serve out what is customarily a 3-year period, and if they're so inclined, are reappointed. So I'm anticipating that my colleagues will offer up some nominations with respect to either appointment or reappointment at this time.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Because I know that we have a couple time-sensitive appointments.
Right.
May I ask that we defer the other pieces? I did not have the time to look through the different pieces the way I'd like to.
Sure.
And, thank you, I would
I'm
just
fine with that. Because to be
promise I'll do
honest
my,
with
I
you,
promise I'll do my homework
I
for
can't
the
imagine
next
what else you were
meeting.
doing, Mary.
I wanted to circle back with the town administrator and chit-chat with him about some of this too. But to those for which we cannot wait,
Yeah.
I think Contributory Retirement Board is one of those, if
Yep.
I'm not mistaken. So I'd like to move that we appoint Eileen McCracken to the Contributory Retirement Board for a 3-year term ending June 30, 2021.
Second.
is that okay, Bob? Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I would make a motion to reappoint Robin McGuire to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a 3-year term ending June 30th, 2021.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I've lost my page.
Sorry about that.
I would like to move that we reappoint the following as associate members of the Zoning Board of Appeals for a 1-year term ending June 30, 2019, and that is Mario Romania, Michael Mercurio, and Joseph Freeman.
Second.
And I would just like to extend my thanks in particular to Mario and Joe, who have served superbly on the ZBA for many, many years and do a great job on some very challenging and difficult projects. And no doubt Mike Mercurio is following along with them. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we're going to hold on that. Before we go into executive session, but before we do that,
We're not coming back, right?
no, we're not going to come back. It's 25 at 10, Council. Michelle, this is where we typically kind of roundtable through and just chit-chat generally. We would start with you, but you're certainly welcome to say something if you wish, but if you want to pass, I totally understand, and we'll go right to my man Tom there.
I just want to say thank you very much for this opportunity. I really look forward to working with everyone, serving the town to the best of my abilities. Thank you.
Very nice. Welcome aboard. Thomas,
I'm good, thank you. I have nothing.
either one of my colleagues like to say anything?
I just want to thank everybody in the community who had a hand in our Independence Day celebrations around the town. The Lions Club for organizing the fireworks and for generating donations, the citizens who donated, the 4th of July Parade Committee, and all the many groups that worked so hard to make that parade so successful. It was just it's always a wonderful celebration in Hingham, and there are too many people to name, but we're just so appreciative.
Here. I mean, I was thinking about it when I was, well, on that day, but then when I was driving here tonight, because this is one of our opportunities to thank people publicly. And I'm always proud to live in Hingham, but that day, for some reason, everybody's out, from rec to fire to DPW to police. Like Mary said, there's just too many to name. Jim Murphy and the 4th of July Parade Committee, and, you know, the folks that are up early out on the race route with their hoses, helping the runners make it through. It really is just a special, special day, so I appreciate that. I do have one shout out to a neighbor of mine when I lived on Liberty Pole Road. I just want to recognize the retirement of Kevin McGill. Kevin McGill has worked in the Boston Police Department for 36 years. He, as you may recall, is in that iconic picture at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. He is a stand-up guy, a stand-up husband, dad, and neighbor, and I just want to wish Kevin all the best in his well-deserved retirement.
Yeah. I think I saw him on Facebook, and I hit the like on that one.
That's worth a like, for sure.
Yeah. I'd echo the sentiments of my colleagues as well. That was a really hot day, and as I started out down Middle Street, I was kind of, oh man, this is hot. But, you know, the enthusiasm of the crowd, and, you know, I think the warm reception that was, at least is how I felt, you know, it made me feel good. You know, we're volunteers at our core, and we put a lot of time in, you know, serving the town in all kinds of different ways. And I think that, you know, the people that saw us and waved to us and greeted us recognized that. And I really, I appreciate that. And I thank you sincerely. So with that, at this point, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real properties, because the discussion of this matter in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the town. We will not return to open session. Roll call vote from left to right.
Aye.
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 Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.